Why is coping portrayed as bad nowadays? I think some people misunderstand about coping. We all have to cope with things being not what we prefer. How we cope can be an issue. Some people think using a crutch is bad. But it's not if you need it and it helps, but again, we can be mistaken about whether what we use as a crutch is actually as beneficial as we think. I think that there is a massive distinction between coping with something and copium. I have to cope with my ADHD on a daily basis. I have coping mechanisms that I have learned over the years that make my life easier. I take my meds, I religiously take notes, I keep myself on a very strict schedule, etc. All of these are ways that I cope with ADHD. Copium, on the other hand, is a very different story. Copium would be me pretending or deluding myself that my ADHD doesn't affect me or that I don't have ADHD in the first place. The delusion that nothing is wrong is a massive problem and is worthy of ridicule. Self-improvement is a good thing, but using self-improvement to delude yourself into believing that nothing is wrong is going to have some pretty negative consequences in the long term. As an older person, I've no idea what coping means in this context. Can you go into more detail? Like, explain how coping is different from other reactions to adversity, and what kind of ridicule you receive in response to it. I think that Urban Dictionary has the best explanation. Cope is usually used among people on the internet as a replacement to phrases like deal with it, cry about it, and others. Saying cope to someone basically means that you said your opinion and you won't change it no matter how the other person feels about it. The fuck? So many people responding who literally don't understand how cope is used as an insult these days. Coping as a mechanism for, say, something like grief has little to do with the cope or copium insult. For example, some people might donate or get rid of things related to their partner who dumped them as a coping mechanism to move on. Or perhaps some might hold a large funeral as a coping mechanism for a loved one passing away. These are not what the cope or copium insult refer to. When someone uses coping as an insult, they are referring to someone being delusional or hiding inadequacy/incompetence in a disingenuous way by pretending nothing is wrong. For example, let's say you get dumped by your girlfriend and are totally blindsided by it. A cope would be saying something like, well, fuck that bitch, I never liked her anyways, or being shitty at every single school subject and being like, well, street smarts is all that matters anyways. In both cases, the rhetoric is used to minimize embarrassment or loss of face on your own part, hiding something that's wrong and playing it off like it's nothing. Associating the original and newer insult version of cope with each other, even if they may have had similar origins at some point, is just going to leave you confused. If someone is using cope as an insult, they're saying that you're unwilling to face reality and are instead opting to hide/mask it in a dishonest way. Beautiful explanation. I was gonna comment something along the lines of imagine cope as like definition 3 of mental gymnastics, but your explanation is too good. Coping is genuinely a good thing when used in the right context. It means to deal with problems in a healthy way. The problem is when people on the internet say, cope, it's a substitute for saying that someone is using a myriad of mental gymnastics to not agree with a fact, or they could possibly be wrong. It's very hard to relate yourself to others. Any mention of past trauma or whatever automatically makes people try to one-up you, like, that's nothing, I had it way worse than you and I turned out fine, and they seem to think it's something to brag about, but it's actually very, very hurtful and damaging. Those comments can set you back a long way in the progress you've already made. I get extremely irate at those people. There are things in our pasts that everyone needs to overcome, and there are realities that people need to come to acceptance with, even though it's against our internal programming to do so. It's a constant struggle, especially if the people you try to talk to are hostile toward it. Finding supportive people that are coping like you is a challenge. Cope as an insult is just that, an insult. I wouldn't put much stock into it. We all have to cope with something at one point or another, as it's human nature. I hear things like, cope harder. Is this what you are referring up? If so, it's a quick way for someone to express the idea, you are wrong and are deluding yourself into believing you are correct. There is healthy coping, where someone learns new behaviors that help them get over their problems and back to being a functional person. There is unhealthy coping, where someone leans into their problems as a way to enjoy the support and sympathy of others without any real intention of fixing anything.